The laughter around the Thanksgiving table died instantly when my father slammed his fist down. His face twisted in rage as he pointed directly at me. "Max, you are not welcome here anymore," he declared coldly, the words hitting harder than any physical blow as my secret relationship with Ian was now out in the open for the entire family to judge. One moment we were passing the mashed potatoes and talking about the game. The next the turkey was forgotten and every eye in the room locked on Ian and me, our hands still linked under the tablecloth like a lifeline. My mother's fork clattered to her plate. My sister Emily gasped, and Uncle Mike just stared into his wine glass as if it might swallow him whole. Dad's voice rose again, echoing off the oak paneling of our suburban Chicago home. "I raised you to be a man, not this. Take your friend and get out." The word friend dripped with disgust, and I felt the floor tilt beneath my chair. Ian squeezed my fingers once, steady and silent, but his jaw was tight the way it got when he was holding back words that could make things worse. I stood slowly, legs numb, the scent of sage and roasted chestnuts suddenly sickening. "Dad, please," I tried, but the sentence cracked and died. He turned away, shoulders rigid in the plaid shirt he always wore for holidays, and that was it. No second look. No chance to explain that Ian wasn't just anyone. That the man beside me had been my anchor through college, through late-night study sessions and quiet admissions under city lights, that I finally understood who I was. I grabbed my coat from the hook by the door, Ian right behind me, and we stepped into the crisp November air before the screen door even finished slamming. The driveway felt endless under the streetlights, our breath fogging as we climbed into my old Honda. Ian didn't speak until we merged onto the highway toward his apartment in the Loop. "You okay?" he asked softly, one hand on the wheel, the other reaching across the console to rest on my knee. I wasn't. Inside my chest something had shattered, sharp pieces cutting every breath. All those years of hiding, of dating girls in high school to keep Dad happy, of excelling at baseball because he needed a son who could throw a perfect curveball. And for what? To be erased from the table like a stain on the linen. Back at Ian's place, a small one-bedroom with exposed brick and the faint smell of his coffee habit. I collapsed onto the couch while he brewed tea neither of us really wanted. My phone buzzed, Mom probably. But I couldn't answer. Not yet. Ian sat beside me, shoulder to shoulder, and for the first time since the blow-up I let the tears come. He looked at me like I was a stranger. I whispered. Ian nodded, his dark hair falling across his forehead the way it did when he was worried. "I know. But you're not alone in this, Max. We'll figure it out." That night we stayed up talking until the city lights dimmed outside the window, replaying every careful step that had led us here. The coffee shop where we met during finals week sophomore year, the first awkward kiss in the rain outside the library, the quiet promise we made last summer to stop hiding from the people who mattered. Now one of them had drawn a line in the sand, and I was on the wrong side. Sleep came in fits, haunted by Dad's face and the empty chair at the table that would stay empty long after the pie was cleared away. By morning the reality settled like frost on the windows. I was 28, gainfully employed as a graphic designer downtown, and suddenly homeless in every way that counted. Ian made eggs and toast, sliding the plate across the counter with a gentle smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Stay as long as you need," he said. I nodded, but the weight in my gut told me this was only the beginning of a much longer road. The phone buzzed again. Emily this time, texting that Mom was crying in the kitchen and Dad had locked himself in the garage. Part of me wanted to drive back and fix it. The other part, the one that had spent years swallowing who I was, knew some breaks couldn't be glued back together with holiday apologies. Ian watched me stare at the screen and pulled me into a hug, his arms solid and warm against the November chill seeping through the old windows. "Whatever happens next," he murmured into my hair, "we face it together." In that moment, with the city waking up outside and my family fracturing miles away, those words were the only thing keeping me from falling apart completely. The days after Thanksgiving blurred into a quiet rhythm inside Ian's apartment, the kind of rhythm that felt both comforting and suffocating at the same time. I called in sick to work on Monday, claiming a stomach bug, But really I just couldn't face the fluorescent lights and casual small talk, while my chest still ached from Dad's words. Ian went to his shift at the community center, where he counseled at-risk teens, and left me with a key and a note on the counter that read, "You are enough exactly as you are." I read it a dozen times while pacing the living room, the hardwood cool under my socks. Around noon my phone lit up with Mom's name again. This time I answered. "Max, honey, he didn't mean it," she started, voice thick with tears. "He's just old-fashioned. Give him time." But I could hear the uncertainty underneath, the way her words stumbled like she was trying to convince herself too. Dad had always been the rock of our family, the one who coached my little league teams and grilled steaks every Sunday, preaching about hard work and traditional values. Now that rock had cracked right down the middle, and I was the reason. I told Mom I loved her, but I couldn't come home yet, not while the air still smelled like rejection. She sighed the way she always did when life got too heavy, and we hung up with promises to talk soon that neither of us fully believed. Ian came home that evening carrying takeout Thai food and a six-pack of the craft beer I liked. We ate on the couch, legs tangled, and for a while the city noise outside dulled the roar in my head. He listened while I spilled everything. The childhood camping trips where Dad taught me to build fires and never once asked if I liked boys. The high school prom date I took because it was expected. The college years when I finally admitted to myself that the flutter I felt around certain guys wasn't just admiration. Ian shared pieces of his own story too. How his parents in California had hugged him the day he came out at 17 and still sent care packages every month. The contrast stung, but his calm acceptance wrapped around me like a blanket. Still, doubt crept in during the quiet hours. Was I asking too much of him, dragging my family baggage into his peaceful life? One night I woke from a nightmare where Dad's voice kept repeating, "Not in my house." And Ian was gone, vanished like smoke. I sat up sweating, heart hammering, and found him in the kitchen making midnight cocoa. "You're spiraling again," he said gently, handing me a mug. We talked until sunrise, and I realized the real crisis wasn't just Dad's anger. It was the voice inside me that still whispered, I might not deserve the love Ian offered so freely. By the end of the week, I forced myself back to work, sketching logos for a new client while trying to ignore the whispers I imagined from coworkers. Ian picked me up after his shift, and we walked along the Riverwalk, the cold wind off Lake Michigan biting our cheeks. "I'm scared I'll lose them forever," I admitted, stopping under a street lamp. Ian turned me to face him, his brown eyes steady. "Families change, Max. Sometimes it takes longer than we want. But you're building something real here with me, with the life you're choosing." His words landed soft but solid, and for the first time since Thanksgiving I felt a small spark of hope flicker. That weekend we decorated his apartment with a tiny artificial tree, stringing lights while holiday music played low. It wasn't the big family chaos I grew up with, but it was ours, and in the glow of those lights I started to believe maybe I could grow into the man I was meant to be without Dad's approval. The phone stayed quiet from home, and the silence hurt more than shouting ever could. December arrived with early snow flurries that dusted the city like powdered sugar, and with it came the first real test of how far my new life could stretch. I had thrown myself into work, landing a small promotion that meant longer hours designing campaign graphics for a local nonprofit, the kind of place that proudly flew rainbow flags in June. The irony wasn't lost on me. One afternoon my boss pulled me aside after a meeting and said, "You seem distracted lately, Max. Everything okay at home?" I mumbled something about holiday stress and escaped to the bathroom, splashing cold water on my face until the mirror stopped showing Dad's disappointed scowl. That evening Ian suggested we grab dinner at our favorite Thai place downtown, but halfway through Pad CW I snapped at him over nothing, accusing him of pushing me too fast to move on. The words tasted bitter the second they left my mouth. Ian set his chopsticks down carefully, the way he did when he was choosing patience over pride. "I'm not pushing, Max. I'm here. But if you keep carrying that anger alone, it's going to push me away instead." The restaurant noise faded as shame flooded my cheeks. We walked home in silence, snow crunching under our boots, and when we reached the apartment I apologized through tears I hadn't known were waiting. He held me on the couch until the shaking stopped, and in that quiet I understood the real betrayal wasn't Dad's. It was my own fear that I would never be enough for anyone. The next morning I found a local support group for gay men navigating family estrangement and dragged myself to the first meeting in a church basement that smelled of coffee and old hymnals. 8 guys sat in a circle, sharing stories that mirrored mine so closely I almost laughed through the pain. One man, a burly construction worker named Marcus, talked about his father disowning him for 10 years before a heart attack brought them back together. "You don't get to control their timeline," he said, looking straight at me. "But you get to control yours." Those words lodged in my chest like a seed. Over the following weeks I kept going, and slowly the knot inside me loosened. Ian never pushed, just showed up with takeout or a new playlist or quiet evenings where we read side by side. One Saturday we volunteered together at the community center's holiday toy drive, and watching him help kids pick out gifts cracked something open in me. This was the life I had chosen, messy and real and mine. But cracks were forming elsewhere too. My sister Emily called one night, voice hushed like she was hiding in the pantry. "Dad's been staring at old photos of you two fishing," she whispered. "He won't admit it, but I think he's hurting." The news should have brought relief. Instead it brought fresh anger mixed with guilt. A cocktail that kept me up until Ian pulled me close and reminded me that healing wasn't linear. By mid-December the city sparkled with lights strung across Michigan Avenue, and for the first time I let myself imagine a Christmas that didn't include the big family table. Ian and I bought a real tree that smelled like pine and possibility, and as we hung ornaments I felt the first genuine smile in weeks stretch across my face. The road ahead was still foggy, but at least now I had a hand to hold while I walked it. The week before Christmas the snow turned serious, blanketing Chicago in white silence that made every street feel like a greeting card. Ian and I had carved out our own traditions. Lazy mornings with coffee and the newspaper, evenings baking cookies that mostly ended up burned because we got distracted talking about everything and nothing. One night, while we were frosting sugar cookies shaped like stars, my phone rang with an unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. It was Uncle Mike, voice gruff and awkward. "Your dad's been quiet, kid. Real quiet. Mom's worried sick." He didn't ask me to come home, just planted the seed and hung up. I set the phone down and stared at the half-decorated tree until Ian wrapped his arms around me from behind. "Whatever you decide," he said. "I've got your back." But deciding felt impossible. Part of me wanted to drive straight to the suburbs and demand an apology. The bigger part knew apologies wouldn't erase years of conditioning that told Dad love had conditions. Across town, unknown to me at the time, Dad was wrestling his own ghosts. My sister later told me he spent hours in the garage tinkering with the old Chevy he never finished restoring, radio off, just staring at the wall. Mom tried everything, from gentle reminders to outright tears, but he kept repeating the same line, "I don't know how to fix this." The holidays amplified everything. Office parties I skipped, invitations from friends that felt hollow without family. Ian suggested we host a small gathering at his place, just a few close friends from the support group and his coworkers. I agreed, and for one bright evening the apartment filled with laughter and the smell of mulled wine. Marcus brought his partner and told stories that had everyone roaring. Watching Ian move through the room, refilling glasses and making sure no one felt left out, I realized how much he had become my family. Later, when the last guest left and we were washing dishes side by side, I turned to him and said the words that had been building for weeks. "I love you. Not because you stayed when things got hard, but because you make me want to be better." He dried his hands and kissed me softly, the kind of kiss that promised tomorrow would be worth fighting for. But the universe wasn't done testing us. 2 days before Christmas Eve my boss called me into his office and offered a dream project that would mean traveling to New York for 3 months starting January. The pay was life-changing, the portfolio boost even better. I came home buzzing and told Ian over dinner. His smile was genuine, but I caught the flicker in his eyes. "That's huge, Max. You should take it." I heard the unspoken fear that distance would widen the cracks my family had already made. That night we lay awake talking through every angle until we agreed I'd accept but come home every other weekend. It felt like a compromise, a step toward the future I was building on my own terms. Christmas Eve morning dawned bright and cold. I was wrapping the last gift for Ian, a leather-bound sketchbook I'd filled with drawings of us through the years, when the doorbell rang. I opened it expecting a delivery and instead found my father standing on the welcome mat, snow on his shoulders and an expression I had never seen before, broken. Dad looked smaller somehow, coat collar turned up against the wind, hands jammed deep in his pockets like he didn't trust them not to shake. "Max," he started, voice rough as gravel. "Can I come in?" I stood frozen in the doorway, the sketchbook still in my hands, while Ian appeared behind me, steady as always. We let him inside, the three of us standing awkwardly in the small living room with the tree lights blinking like they were trying to fill the silence. He didn't sit. Instead, he stared at the floor and spoke in short, halting sentences. I was wrong. Scared. My own father, he drilled into me that real men didn't, you know. The words stuck, but I heard them anyway. He talked about his childhood in a small Indiana town where different meant dangerous, about the fear that had followed him into fatherhood like an unwanted shadow. When I saw you with Ian at the table, it felt like everything I believed was crumbling. I panicked. Ian stayed quiet, giving us space, but I saw the way his shoulders relaxed just a fraction. Dad's eyes finally met mine, wet and pleading. "Your mother showed me pictures of you too. The way you look at each other, I never had that." I was jealous and ashamed all at once. "I'm sorry, son. I'm so damn sorry." The apology hung between us, raw and imperfect, but real. I didn't forgive him right away. Forgiveness wasn't a switch you flipped. Instead, I asked the question that had burned in me for weeks. "Why now? Why Christmas?" He swallowed hard. "Because the house is too quiet. Emily won't speak to me. Your mom sleeps on the couch. And every time I walk past your old room, I see the trophies I made you earn and realize I never once asked what you wanted." The honesty cracked something open in my chest. We talked for hours, Ian occasionally adding gentle insights that kept the conversation from spiraling. Dad listened, really listened, when I described the nights I cried in college dorms wondering if I was broken. When he finally stood to leave, he hugged me. Awkward at first, then fierce, and whispered, "I want to meet Ian properly. When you're ready." After the door closed, Ian and I collapsed onto the couch, drained but lighter. That evening we drove to my parents' house together, the city lights blurring past as snow fell softly. Mom opened the door crying happy tears, pulling us both inside. The dinner table was smaller this year, just the five of us including Emily, but the food tasted better than any Thanksgiving I could remember. Dad carved the ham with shaking hands and raised his glass. "To second chances," he said, looking straight at me. I clinked my glass against his and felt the last sharp pieces inside me begin to smooth. Later, while Ian helped Mom with dishes, Dad pulled me aside in the living room. "I still don't understand everything," he admitted quietly. "But I want to learn. For you." It wasn't perfect. There would be more conversations, more stumbles. But it was a beginning. On the drive home, Ian rested his hand on my knee again, the same steady touch that had carried me through the darkest weeks. "You did good tonight," he said. I smiled into the darkness. We both did. Christmas morning arrived wrapped in quiet joy. Ian and I exchanged gifts under our little tree, laughing over the ridiculous reindeer sweater he bought me and the new camera lens I surprised him with. The phone rang while we were still in pajamas, and this time it was Dad inviting us for brunch. The drive felt different now, lighter, the suburban streets familiar in a way that no longer hurt. When we walked in, Mom had set 2 extra places at the table without fanfare. Dad stood up immediately, offered Ian his hand, and said simply, "Thank you for taking care of my son when I couldn't." Ian shook it firmly, and just like that, the tension that had poisoned the air for weeks began to dissolve. We ate pancakes and talked about safe things first: work, the weather, the Bears' playoff chances. Then Dad cleared his throat and turned to Ian directly. I owe you an apology too. I was rude in my own house. That's not the man I want to be. Ian accepted with the grace I had come to expect from him, and the conversation opened up from there. Emily shared how she had researched support groups online and left articles on Dad's nightstand. Mom admitted she had been praying every night for this exact moment. I listened more than I spoke, letting the healing happen in real time. After brunch, we moved to the living room where Dad pulled out an old photo album I hadn't seen in years. There we were, father and son at Little League, fishing at the lake, me in a too big baseball cap grinning up at him. I was proud of you every single day, he said, voice thick. I just didn't know how to show it when the rules changed. I reached over and squeezed his shoulder. The rules didn't change, Dad. I did. And I'm still your son. He nodded, eyes glistening, and for the first time since I was a kid, I saw him cry. Ian sat beside me, our fingers linked openly on my knee, and no one looked away. That afternoon we took a walk around the neighborhood. Snow crunching under our boots, Dad and Ian talking about basketball like they'd known each other for years. Mom linked her arm through mine and whispered, I'm so proud of the man you've become. By the time we said goodbye, the sun was setting in streaks of pink and gold, painting the snow like a promise. Back at the apartment, Ian and I stood at the window watching the city lights flicker on. You okay? He asked, the same question he'd asked 1,000 times since Thanksgiving. This time I answered without hesitation. Yeah, better than okay. He pulled me close, and in the warm circle of his arms I felt the full circle complete. From rejection to redemption, from fear to freedom. The journey wasn't over, but I finally believed I could walk it without losing myself. True or false? A family's love can truly heal the wounds caused by years of prejudice against a gay son's identity?